Well, welcome to this October edition of the Pathway to Purpose webinar. And thank you. Thank you so much for serving Christ and continuing to allow us to serve your journey in leading a company for Christ. I'm Ken Powell, your host here today and Director of Engagement Strategy here at FCCI. Well, if you've been around FCCI for long, you'll hear us talking about the fact that one of the key value propositions of FCCI is really wrapped up in our membership, the Christian business leaders who consider FCCI their family. And on our website, you'll see the statement, a global movement of servant leaders who help each other lead companies for Christ. And to that end, on each of these webinars, we really do encourage you to introduce yourselves on the YouTube chat so that you get connected and you can help propel this global movement through God-honoring business relationships. And additionally, we do have a community platform, an app that serves the purpose of greater connectivity with other kingdom entrepreneurs and business leaders like yourself here at FCCI, and it is called Connect. We try to keep it simple here. So you'll learn more about the Connect app if you go to fcci.org. And in our desire to serve you and provide additional opportunity for you to get to know the FCCI family of companies, hearing from other Christian business leaders and owners, and receiving some inspirational and encouraging content, we deliver a weekly Pathway to Purpose podcast. Here you are on the webinar. Well, we also have a weekly podcast. Thank you for being here on our monthly webinar. And that podcast is available on all your favorite podcast platforms. It's also a video. There's a video version on YouTube. So you can head to one of those platforms, just do a search for Pathway to Purpose podcast from FCCI. I've also included a link in the email that you'll receive following today's webinar. So you'll have quick and easy access to the podcast. Another link you'll find in that email that's coming out to you relates to the FCCI International Conference that we had just last month. It was just full of excellent keynote presentations and workshops, breakout sessions, devotional messages, and you can access that content for free through that link in that email. So register for access, and we pray that you'll leverage that content for your own personal development, of course, but then also in your business leadership groups, small groups, in your church context, as God leads you to leverage that content for His glory. And as you can see in this image that I've pulled up here, this photo from the conference, we were blessed to have Ken Boa, the president of Reflections Ministries, and Russ Crossan, Executive Vice Chairman of Ronald Blue Trust, speaking at the conference as they spoke from their recent book release called Leverage, Using Temporal Wealth for Eternal Gain. And of course, you've joined us here today to hear from another member of the Ronald Blue Trust team, and that's Colby Gilmore. So Colby, thanks for taking part in today's webinar and being here with us.
Hey, Ken, it's good to be here.
And Colby and I enjoy being part of an FCCI group that's centered in Franklin, Tennessee, in that region. And I'm a huge fan of the work that God's doing through Colby, both in that group and in his calling through Ronald Blue Trust. And before we dive into the content you're going to present here today, maybe just share with us a little bit, Colby, about your role and this calling that God's placed on your life.
Yeah, I'd love to. I'm a wealth strategist here in Nashville, Tennessee, part of Ron Blue Trust. But my journey started way back. And for those that know me, I can't go anywhere without sharing about Biola University. But that's where I went to school. And while I was at Biola, I took a class called Faith and Money that just changed my life. All of a sudden, I realized my faith had some practical theology. And I was an accountant type, and all of a sudden I thought, wow, we got this good book that has all the principles you need about handling God's money. And that's how God led my steps towards Ron Blue. And I've been here now a little over 7 years, helping really focusing mostly on business owners, family business owners, and then entertainers on how to really steward their wealth and their influence as well as their businesses. So it's a joy. Only days that I actually think I'm working are the days technology doesn't work. That is what spiritual warfare is. So we'll hope it stays away from us today.
Amen to that. That's for sure. So I always appreciate the fact that Colby brings up his background in Biola. My grandfather attended Biola, so love those ties and just so thankful for all that's there and the rich heritage that's there. So, well, as we get started here, let me before we turn things completely over to Colby and just have him provide his presentation, if you would, as we're going along here, jot down some questions, things that maybe come to mind that you'd love for Colby to interact with you on. Put those into the Q&A chat section there of YouTube. And if you would just put a Q in front of the question, it just makes it easy for us to find the question in the chat stream. So if you would do that, and we'll look forward to having some Q&A here after the presentation. So with that, Colby, I'll turn things over to you. It's all yours.
All right. Well, thanks, Ken. Well, I'm really excited to share today. Wouldn't it be funny if I said I wasn't excited to share today? Well, I am excited to share a topic called what I'm titling as designing a centered set business generosity plan. So we'll focus on what centered set means as we go through, but really this idea of a three-dimensional generosity in your businesses. A couple administrative items as we jump in. First one, because you're going to think this the whole time. I am not in The Chosen, but maybe, just maybe, I was a stand-in for Jesus Revolution. Well, do any of you remember COVID, right? We may have forgotten that by now. We won't ever forget that. But during COVID, I had a unique opportunity. You remember when people would lose their taste? So my wife got COVID several times. I never did. I tried as hard as I could to get it, couldn't get it. But when she lost her taste, I took the job of cooking. And my wife's a very good cook. She makes incredible spaghetti, all kinds of stuff. So I thought, well, I can make spaghetti. I can do this. And guess what the silver lining is? She can't taste anything. She doesn't know if it's going to be good or bad. So I went into the kitchen and I started, my attempt of making spaghetti, which should be a pretty easy task. And pretty soon I hear from the living room her go, was the water boiling? Was the meat fully thawed? And she's asking me these questions, and she's not even in the room. And the thing was, she knows the key principles to make good spaghetti. And she knows without even having taste or smell if something's wrong, right? And a lot of that comes down to even as we steward what we're doing or we make decisions, if we know our key principles and our key convictions around things, we don't even need a smell or taste test, right? We just know something isn't right here, or maybe we're not following this right. So anyways, that's my funny way of getting into this presentation. But all of us that are here, I want us to focus now on a different position we have. We might be business owners. I'm a financial advisor, wealth strategist. You might be whatever you may be. Well, we're all influencers, right? We might know this more frequently nowadays because there are people that are literally titled as an influencer. But we're influencers because each of us have a sphere of influence. We're a center of influence to the people we interact with, our employees, our community, our suppliers, our customers. So as we think through that, I want to make sure we reflect, how are we stewarding our influence? Because often we might think purely on the finances or the time and the talents, but what about our influence? And something I wrestle with as we come to webinars like this, or any kind of conference, is we keep accumulating more and more like biblical or wise principles around stewardship. The question I have often though is what are we actually doing with that, right? That we have these resources, this time, this money, possessions, our influence, and we keep accumulating wisdom. And I'm just curious what we're going to do with it, right? So our influence, it might matter in 20 minutes from now, it might matter in 20 days or 20 years, but it might also matter 20 trillion years from now, right? As we engage with people and have that effect, that ripple effect, right, that goes out to others. So as we accumulate these knowledge, these wisdoms, I want to know, and I want to ask you this question: are you the Dead Sea or the Red Sea? Now, one sea here has water that flows into it and nothing that flows out of it. It sits there hoarding and nothing can survive. It builds up salt. That's the Dead Sea. Now, the other sea has water that flows into it and out of it simultaneously. It's simultaneously being fed while feeding others. It's rich. It looks prettier. It has health to it. So probably some of you have just left the FCCI conference and know what you do at conferences. It's always that mountaintop experience. We leave energized. We have new insightful ideas. We've got notebooks full of all the things we're going to do. And what's happened now? It's been 2, 3, 4 weeks since FCCI. And typically we go back and we're back on the grind, and we've left the mountaintop, and we're not actually applying anything. We've changed. And I'll call that's the conference attendee mentality. But I want to bring up another idea, which is the daily participation mentality, right? We can go to these conferences, gather great information, but how do we connect that to coming back and participating daily in what we're doing in our businesses? We can take those great theories and knowledge, but how do we apply it? How do we actually lean towards being the Red Sea, that it can actually flow out of us and we're not just storing it up and really never going to use it? So as we go through today, I want to open up some ideas around how you actually implement these. I don't want it just to be some kind of a inspirational talk. Maybe it won't even be inspirational, but that you can take something and go, let's actually start participating in God's kingdom and moving forward. I found it funny, though. I heard this recently from an Old Testament scholar that said, I don't actually think there's any perfect leaders in the Bible. Which would be funny, right? Because how many books have you bought or been sold that are about biblical leadership, right? It's about someone here, there, all around. And what I want to throw out there is that there are good leadership styles in the Bible, but there aren't any perfect leaders. Maybe other than Jesus. We'll exclude him, right? Because he's actually God, so we're never going to be that. But I just want to pause there, and I'm going to bring that back up in a second. So our challenge, as we're thinking about being the Dead Sea or the Red Sea, is that the more money that we have, right, the more power, influence we have, it's kind of like gravity. And the more of it we have, it has a force that exerts on us, pulling us into orbit around it. So I want to know, how do we recognize when we're being pulled into force or into gravity with the money that we have, right? So that's our challenge. But we have some opportunities, right? Every challenge is a good opportunity. So I want to go along with this premise throughout the presentation, and you probably are all going to agree with this, that God owns it all. There's plenty of verses talking about how God owns it all. Psalms 24:1 says, the earth is the Lord's, everything in it, the universe and all that it contains. Great. So if we do an if-then statement, right, I might leave this to the better apologists out there, right? But if God owns it all, and you own a business, and God owns everything, including yourself, then God owns your business. Do you believe that? Yeah, we probably all believe that. We've all said that for sure. But do we actually really mean it? Do we really apply that? We're commanded to build treasure in heaven, not on earth, but do we actually do that? So I want to challenge us that, are we actually just storing up those things, just like the Dead Sea? Are we actually living it out and applying it? And that leads to our opportunity, right? Every great challenge has a great opportunity. And God is calling us, and you specifically in your business, of how are you going to utilize that opportunity you have to actually be his manager and what he's given to you. Now, going back to the Bible, right, I said that there's no perfect leaders in the Bible. And the reason I say that is there's some good ones, right? Nehemiah. Okay, great. Nehemiah was a good leader, right? He was a servant leader. But I don't know how many of you also go and pluck the hairs out of all your enemies' heads like Nehemiah did. I don't know. David was a pretty good leader too. He had some pretty big moral failures. So all I say that is they may be good, but they may not be perfect, right? And now it's funny though, because as we think through perfect versus good, especially as business owners, probably most of us want to be perfect, right? We're seeking towards excellence. Is that our God, if we go back into Genesis, is a perfect God. But he never created a perfect world. Isn't that funny? When he created the whole world in Genesis, he didn't make a perfect world. He could have, but he said it was good. He made it very good. And the word good in Hebrew is actually a word called tav, which the interpretation is more of being in harmony with God, that there's actually a created order and we're open to participate in it. So as we look at leadership and ourselves in particularly, I want to just say, don't seek to be perfect. Seek to be good. Seek to be participants in what God's allowing us to do in his economy, right? The funny thing too is if we search for perfection, we end up being procrastinators, right? Because we just never can get there. It's always just eventually you just have to send that email. It's not going to get any better, right? So I'm going to start off with a story about my family, and then we'll get into the practical stuff. But I want to tell you a tale of two grandpas. They're business owners, cowboys, and faithful stewards. You got my Papa Ed and my Grandpa Arlen. One of us has had a promotion to the kingdom. The other is still participating in God's economy here on earth. But both of them ran businesses for 60 plus years. Both of them were first generational business owners. Both of them involved the second and third generations in their business. I've worked in both of theirs. They were great learning experiences. They both were faith-led businesses. And it didn't mean they ever once went to a conference, right? But they just knew their God and they led knowing God owns this business. So they owned businesses such as Papa Ed ran car washes in San Francisco, he had gas stations, Wendy franchises, hotels, show horses, tow businesses, even an airline. My Grandpa Arlen has a very successful construction business. He's built most of Central Oregon, if you've ever visited. Was one of the top builders for Gilmore resorts in the Pacific Northwest. He owned Redmond Air FBO, had a waste management company in Idaho, and had some properties. So both of these business owners for 60 plus years, do you think they made some failures? Do you think they didn't succeed all the time? Yeah, plenty, I'm sure. And I'm sure they would say that. So they weren't ever perfect, but what did they continue to do? Even in the hardest times, they participated knowing, God, this is your business, and I'm just going to show up and continue to work hard and see where you're going to take this, right? All right, that's the fun of my family. But as we go into this three-dimensional generosity approach, I want to redefine generosity for us. And in Romans 12:2, Paul challenges us not to be conformed to the world, but to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. So within the context of generosity, this involves business owners transforming their minds in areas. So before I jump into that, I don't know if any of you have ever read the book, The Experience Economy, but it does a great job of showing how the economies have changed over time, right? At one point, it was just commodities. Then we wanted goods, right? We'd pay a little bit more for the goods than the commodities. Then we wanted to be served, right? Then there was the service industry that we pay a little bit more for. And then after that, it's experiences. We want to make believe. We'll pay Disney a lot of money so we can make believe, right? But then the last step is transformation. And now your business might be in the goods and services, you might be in the experiences, but all of us as believers in taking our calling is we are in the transformation business, right? We're trying to transform people's lives on earth, but also in eternity. So as we think through business owners, right, there's the secular world of the worldly thinking. And the funny thing is, the world isn't afraid of generosity. They think that's a good thing. Yeah. And they would say, yeah, it's giving's a good thing. We'll do most of it probably outside of the business. Generosity, we'll give, but we don't want it to limit our results. We just want to be able to check that box, right? So we look good to society. So giving could limit results. Generosity focus on donations. We're going to make donations to certain calls so we get our name out there. And we're going to focus on just the current giving. Well, what we'd like transformed business thinkers to think through is that you give through the business. And that might not just be monetarily, but how do we give through the business, not separate from it? Generosity could drive results, right? It can actually inspire and create some better results and a better culture. Generosity includes investing in people, right? It's not just the 501c3 deduction. It's actually how do we focus on generosity among the people we have? And we're thinking about focused on sustainable giving, right? That's just not, we're giving a cause today, we're giving for generational impact. Now, I've mentioned centered set businesses. So how do we create a centered set business? So what a centered set means is there's bounded sets, which a bounded set is kind of like you're on the bus or you're off the bus, right? It's our way or the highway. And this may look more like the inner circle, right? This might be a business where here's the key executives and leadership, and then everyone else is just the minions. They're not included in it. They're just going to do our tasks. Or maybe it's kind of that old model of, hey, we just fire the bottom 10%, right? We're in or you're out. There's a fuzzy set. I won't really throw that in there, but a fuzzy set would kind of be like, think of maybe like a kind of random startup company, or maybe even, yeah, we'll start with a startup company where everyone's kind of just moving around. They're not exactly sure where we're going, but we're just trying to do stuff, right? So what I want to propose is, how do we look through being a centered set? business. And what that would mean is that there's a clear center, being Christ, but it might actually be what is your clear mission? And hopefully inside of that, there's some kind of redemption or Christ honoring theme. And it's how do we point people towards the center, that we're all moving the same direction. Doesn't mean we're all bound by certain rules or creeds that we have to follow. We're not a cult, but how are we moving people close to the center? Now, there might be people that are moving away from the center or might be moving diagonal to the center. And that's fine, right? There might be people at your organizations that just, they're not going to align with that. But how are we getting everyone kind of moving towards that center approach, right? And to do that, we have to go, there's more to the business than the financial value, right? The bounded set might be, here's financial results, we got to get that. That's it. The centered set's going to be, there's financial value, but there's also relational capital. And when we look at a relational capital, we have to go from one dimension of financial value to two-dimensional thinking through social value. And the third dimension is what is the spiritual value. Now, in the parable of the talents, we could compare a business owner to having 5 talents, like in the parable. Now, I'm not going to say that's actually what the parable is about. I'm not going to pull from scripture and make it something else, but I'm going to say, let's use that as an example, right? It's a good example. So we want to hear one day, well done, good and faithful servant. And there's 5 talents that a business owner is given. So I'll unpack that shortly. Now, the first step in this 3-dimensional generosity is sustainable generosity, right? We don't want just current giving, it's sustainable. So as we think through prioritizing the ongoing health of the business, it's a lot about legacy. How do we leave a lasting impact? I'm sure plenty of you have followed the Coach Prime story on college football, or maybe you've watched Ted Lasso on Apple. And a lot of those stories, what do we learn from them is that it's not about the result of the game, right? It's about actually leaving lasting impact in the people that you leave behind, right? So your legacy isn't going to be the assets and the business you leave behind. It's the impact and the influence that you have on people. Now, scripture gives us some pretty clear directions around 3 areas of 3 business themes, and one being stewardship. Right? That we're applying limited resources to unlimited alternatives, that we're called to be faithful and how we manage that. And one day we will actually, God will ask us what we did with those things. Another one is actually having wisdom, right? Going back to the Dead Sea, right? We go to these conferences, we accumulate knowledge, but how do we apply that? Wisdom is the application of that knowledge. And applying that knowledge to reduce the risk of uncertainty and increase our chances of success. Doesn't mean we will be successful, but hopefully we're going in the right direction. And the third is just leadership, that we're the best leader makes the next leader better than themselves, that we're helping others grow. So our challenge, going back to the beginning, is God's word. Are we going to take it or leave it? Have we got these great instructions in the Bible? And we don't have to always cherry pick, but are we going to take it or not? That's your choice. All right, so going back to the centered set business, our second step in the 3-dimensional generosity is understanding your kingdom positioning. The truth is your business plays a unique role in accomplishing God's plan because no one else has your same employees, your same customers, your same vendors, and your same community influence. So how do we make that centered set? Well, as we think through centered set, you want to have corporate clarity of what is that center. Think through employee morale so that employees are actually engaged and excited to be focusing on this center. We want to have focused stewardship on how we actually steward everyone as well as our resources, and attracting and retaining the next generation. And the interesting thing here is I'm going to show you an example at Ron Blue Trust of how we do this as a covenantal organization, but there's a lot of great, I kind of call it like the old church mentality, right? That there's some great organizations that they were great at the time, had great leadership, and then later on the next generation comes in and it kind of smells like it's a little musty, right? It doesn't attract the next generation. We're not really into it anymore. We're just that center. We're out. We're not into that. So I want to give you an example. At Ron Blue Trust, our mission is to help Christians free up resources to assist in fulfilling the Great Commission, right? That is the Great Commission. But we also go into 1 Timothy that says we're here to instruct those that are rich in this present age to not put their hope on the uncertainty of wealth, but on God who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. To instruct them to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share so they can store up for themselves a firm foundation for the future, right? The calling that we all are rich, we might not think it, but we are. Now that mission, right, that's the centered set, that obviously points towards Christ and making disciples. But that's something that has not only inspired the first generations of the Ron Blues and the Russ Crossons, but another generation and another generation. Then you got millennials here that are as fired up or more than they were. And I got some Gen Zers on my team. So it's a mission that is transcended to attract and retain talent because we all want to go towards the center. Now, there's other visions that a part of that, if it's multiple generations having trust in their advisors, or significant dollars going to charities, or husbands and wives having unity, which is why we host marriage conferences. Well, those are all other things that help push towards that center. And of course, every business has to have core values. So here's some of our core values that are centered set on, hey, we need biblical wisdom, pursuit of excellence, life balance, respect for relationships, faithful stewardship, and integrity. But here's my question. As you look at this, or even our mission and vision, how many of these are financially related? How many of these are relationally or socially related? But how many of these are spiritually related? I won't answer that, but I would say that actually as we focus a lot more on spiritual and social capital, it can lead a lot more to the financial capital, but not typically the other way around. All right, that's enough about us at Ron Blue. Going into the kingdom positioning, the first step to think through is our why. Right? We all know that. We've probably read Simon Sinek. But is understanding, why has God created your business? God thinks generationally. So when God created your business, he's thinking not with just you in mind as the current owner, but the next owners. So some questions for you to think through right now is, why did God create the business? Why did God give this business to your family? What are God's plans for this business after you transition the business, right? It's not just about you. Every steward's got to ask, is the next steward prepared to handle it? So just some questions to think through the why, right? I don't have those answers for you, but you will discover those. The second step of your kingdom positioning is, what is the center? So in determining your kingdom positioning, we need to know the nature of your kingdom impact that God's calling you to make. And I love Ephesians 2:10 because it talks about, right, that we are a masterpiece created for good work. Other translations say that we're like his poetry, right? And it's really unique because I think, what if God views us that way, that we're so great and we're created for good works? What if we treated other people that way, as other image bearers that are that important? So God has a passion that he's placed in your heart as an owner and a leader, and it's there for some reason. Here's just a couple ideas that we pull from scripture that might align with you to help point you in the right direction. There's adorning the gospel, right? How do we just make the gospel look good? Unfortunately, I feel that often, even though we complain that society after us as Christians, a lot of the reasons are we've made a bad name for ourselves. So how do we actually make it look good? Maybe it's to focus on fulfilling the great commandments, right? Of loving God and loving others. Or maybe it's furthering the great commissions and creating and raising up disciples. All right, so third step, and this goes back to the 5 talents as the owner, is what are you equipped with to make impact? And that is your employees, your customers and your clients, your vendors and your suppliers, maybe even your bankers. Don't forget about bankers, they're people too. Your profits, and then your brand and your influence. Here's your 5 talents. And funny enough, probably everyone, secular or non, would look at your customers and clients and go, yeah, well, we want to trust them. We want to be really good to our customers. We want to be nice to them because, of course, that's how we make business. We might nowadays focus a little bit more on, yeah, well, we also need to care for our employees because, if our employees are well, then our customers will be well. Those things drive profits, they're financial value. How often, though, do we think about our vendors, our suppliers, our bankers? How do we interact with them? And I would love to know, what if Christians we were just so good at running our businesses, whatever, how small or big, that the rest of the society, they could go, I don't like their God and their teachings, but man, they're good at business. They just love on us. When they buy their supplies or when they're using us as a vendor, they pay early or they pay on time. They're fun to deal with. they're nice, they're caring? What if every customer, even if they're not even aligned, I don't know if you remember that picture with my grandpa early on, Papa Ed. The guy next to him was Huey Lewis. Huey Lewis, a Christian? I don't know. Do you think my grandpa shared with him every day he came to the car wash about his faith? He did. Do you think Huey didn't care? Well, most of the time he didn't care, but did he keep coming back to the car wash because they did a good job? Yeah. So what if we did that, where we constantly were doing so well and we weren't afraid of it? If it's suppliers, customers, employees, what we do with our profits or our influence. All right. Fourth step, though, if we have identified the people, is where are we? Where are you actually positioned, right? You might have where's your Jerusalem? You might have a small business that's in a neighborhood or a city. How are you going to impact exactly where you're at? You don't have to focus on Oregon if you're in Nashville. Now, if your business is bigger and you have operations across the state or country, well, then you might be thinking on a bigger aspect of how you're positioned in the country. And that might be different too. Know that you're probably on a bigger level going to have to segment the different areas that you're in and knowing your unique positioning in those places. Or maybe you're a multinational company. You've got all the joys of dealing with different areas and different cultures. All right, going back to the three-dimensional generosity, our third step after the kingdom positioning is to develop a business generosity plan to begin stewarding those 5 talents. And we're going to organize these in 4 key areas. And this is where it's going to get real practical. And I hope you can take this and then actually jot it down and go, we're going to do this, get your rocks out for next year, for 2024, and start accomplishing these. So the 4 areas to focus on are, what's the time that's going to be invested in this? What's the money that's going to be invested? What is your focus? And what is the intended impact? So let's start with talent number 1. Probably your most talented people, your employees, right? So here's some different best practices you could incorporate. Hey, do you have a workplace chaplaincy program? I saw Ron Henry on here, so shout out to him. But if you don't, go find marketplace chaplains. That's probably a low time investment. It might cost you something, a medium. And what is it going to do? It's going to help further the Great Commission. You probably do that locally, right? What about, you might hire executive coach to train up your emerging leaders. That might be a high money cost, but it's probably low time. You don't have to do a lot there. That's adorning the gospel. That's remembering that your employees are created for good works. That might be locally based. You might create a Share It Forward foundation to help others. Maybe you send handwritten notes to appreciate your employees. That's really low cost, low time, and again, adorning the gospel. So here's some examples. I like 8 too. This is always a fun one. Do you ever have events or seminars for employees on focusing on the bigger pictures of life, right? Like maybe you have, I'll shout out to Dr. Chris and Elisa Grace, the Biola Center for Marriage and Relationships. Hey, they would be great people to come speak about relationships and marriage, right? So your employees can succeed at those places. Or maybe you have Crown Financial or Ron Blue Trust share about financial wellness, right? So they stay good so they can keep working for you. All right, that's talent number 1, your employees. Let's go to talent number 2, your customers, your clients. Well, 1, this is probably given to you, provide excellent customer service. That's going to take time. It's going to take some money, but that's another way of just adorning the gospel. And that might be across the state, right? You might do operations with customers around the state. Do you invest in new product development to meet needs in the developing world? That's probably expensive and takes time, but how are you continuing to improve to make sure you're meeting the needs of people, that you're not going to become that stale old church, right? That you're going to continue to pursue. That might be even internationally based, right? You might have to go learn from other culture, other places out in the world. Do you ever give gifts or maybe do a charitable contribution, right? I think we see that a lot nowadays. You buy something and they'll give a gift on your behalf, but do you do that? That's a way that you can be increasing in generosity. Do you ever share the gospel with clients? Now that's always a hard one, right? And I feel like we sometimes we do it badly. Either we're way over the top or we don't even engage at all, right? Going back to Grandpa, he shared it with Huey Lewis and other entertainers that would sit with him on the bench, and most of them said, "You don't say that again," but he would keep doing it. They could have left, but the business was good. All right, that's your customers and your clients. Let's move toward your vendors, your suppliers. So, do you pay your vendors in advance of negotiated terms, right? That'd be a weird one because typically, what does the capitalistic model say? Hey, it's net 30. Let's wait to day 30 to pay that. What if you paid them a little earlier? Probably be different. We'd live a little differently. What about hosting any annual vendor appreciations? And you could even include a little kingdom message, right? You don't have to bring a pastor, but you can bring someone that speaks to redemption. Right? You could go find that chosen guy, and he could probably give a good speech. You ever ask to pray for your vendors or suppliers? Ever just ask, hey, is there anything I pray for? I really haven't met, I don't know if you have, people that are like, nah, don't pray for me. Like, I don't care where they're on in the spectrum. Most people are like, oh yeah, well, I'll take a prayer. This might be awkward, but I'll take it. Right. So that's another way to just think through, how do we actually increase in our generosity across our vendors and our suppliers? What about our profits? All right. So this is where I come in. So before we just start giving it all away, right? You can invest in your benefits program. Do you have, other than just having good profits, are you really focusing on having the best healthcare for your employees? What about a very generous retirement program or profit sharing? What about vacations and work-life balance that you're encouraging them to go and enjoy their life, right? Where do we invest in those things? That might be high cost, but what would the impact be there? That might help you fulfill the great commandment of loving your neighbor. How about mission trips? You ever done a mission trip and invited some people along, or leading your employees by paying for a mission trip? That'd be interesting. I know at Ron Blue Trust, we'll often take clients on vision trips. So they actually see like, wow, okay, you just tell me to give, but now I actually get to see where the generosity is going. Now my heart is engaged. I might want to actually engage more. Do you give a percentage of your gross or net income to charity? That might be the easier mentality of just saying, okay, we make so much, we'll give 10% straight away, right? Has that been included in it? Because remember, it is God's business in the first place. And then our fifth one is the brand and influence. Remember, you are influencers. How do we be that Red Sea and let the waters flow out of us? Do you designate a portion of your income to have community impact? Right? Maybe you just build up a fund for financial hardships or for fundraisers so you can care directly for your community. It doesn't always have to be a 501c Christian organization. What if you're just showing up in the community, being the hands and feet? Maybe you invite your employees, your clients, your vendors to go build a house or serve at a homeless shelter, right? What a uniqueness. Like going back to our mission at Ron Blue, and we're all in on this. Hey, we have employees that are all about that center and that mission. We have clients that are excited about that center of the mission. And we have strategic partners out there that are excited about that. Well, that's cool. That's just one mission and one company, but all of the other talents coming alongside that going, we want to help promote that. Maybe you convene with other like-minded influencers for kingdom purposes. Maybe that's why you're part of FCC, and that's great. If you don't have the incredible group that we have here in Franklin/Nashville, I hope you do, because those groups are so powerful, and they're not people that are going to be my clients necessarily, but they're my other influencers in my life, my mentors. They're people that might actually be strategic partners, but we're in this together, sharing our stories in the local community. All right. The final step, though, is it's great to think through those things, but how do we actually put action into place? How do we implement these? And remember, you don't have to do this alone. There's a lot of great people out there that would love to come alongside you and help you out. So, for example, hey, have you thought about chaplaincy programs? Look through Marketplace Chaplains or call up Corporate Chaplains of America, right? There you go. Someone can help fill that need. You don't have to be a chaplain. Hey, thinking about better helping your clients through financial wellness? Well, maybe you need to review your retirement plans. Hey, retirement plan analytics, they're excellent at that. They're one of the best, and they actually have they think biblically about it and have a biblically centered approach to financial wellness. So now you're not only helping your clients with your money, but they might actually be learning a little bit about some principles around God's word. Obviously, we're here at FCCI. That's a great way to interact with customer, vendors, and influence. If you have profits out there, well, you can call us at Ron Blue Trust. We're going to definitely help you steward your money well and help you steward your business well around that. We do that all day long. We're not an investment advisor. We're a wealth experience, a wealth planning transformation. Interesting enough too, you might get to a point where you go, hey, I need another partner because either we're going to transition or we just need some other capital infused. Maybe you need to call Sovereign's Capital. Maybe they're going to look at you as a faith-aligned business and go, yeah, we're going to come partner with our private equity money and help you continue to build out what God's blessed you with, or help transition that. Now, I can't just focus on the businesses without focusing on the individual. And as we know, a lot of those leaders in the Bible did well in their leadership roles, but failed on the personal side. So as you think through your personal life, know, where is your center? How are you centered? Is God the middle of your world? Because you have so much to balance. Probably your work or your business is a lot bigger than that small segment here. But how are you incorporating that faith alignment with bringing your work towards the center, bringing your family towards the center? Are you engaging in your church? Maybe your church not even headed to the center. How are you engaging there? And then your community in the world, right? So how do you have that balanced life? But of course, when you're balanced or not, you're still going to work and you're going to make income. And who's helping you or holding you accountable to your giving plans personally, or helping you think through your giving and your taxes and your living lifestyle, right? Someone's got to be close. I'm too close to my own situation to make objective decisions. That's why I have my own advisor, right? But who's there sitting with you and your family outside or personally to help you make those decisions? And just like the business needs to focus on social value and spiritual value, as you build up your estate, which if you have a business, there's a big resource, there's a big asset. Most of the world just thinks financial capital, right? We build it all up, we pass it to our kids, and they'll have it better off than we did. But we forget all the hardships that we went through along the way to make us who we are, right? And the thing about financial capital is I'm sure we know plenty of trust fund babies out there who have no wisdom and they aren't good participants in society. So you've got to help focus on how do you personally build up and invest in social capital and spiritual capital for your heirs, your next stewards, because that's how you have life impact. And typically when we see if there's a strong foundation of spiritual and social capital, the financial capital is going to be better handled because they won't blow through it. And one of the last points is create shared meaning. Dr. John Gottman, who is the lead marriage researcher, he talks about in one of his books that one of the key principles for healthy marriages is that they create shared meaning together, right? So as you think through you and your spouse and your family, what is that family purpose statement? What is that center you're all pursuing together, right? We know where our treasure is, there our hearts will be also. So as you guys think through that, what's your vision, your mission, your values, your purpose, your passion as a family? And the funniest thing, well, I don't know if it's funny, but I doubt there's many couples out there getting divorced because they're both so generous, right? Most couples that are very generous are very, very happy and aligned because they're pursuing a shared meaning together. So I hope you guys can find that as well. Now, if you've engaged and you go, yeah, Colby, I'm really into this generosity plan and I just want to be, I think I have opportunities to be more generous. I just don't know how. Well, maybe you have intellectual property in your business, right? Maybe you got royalties, but depending on, maybe it's oil and gas interests, or maybe you're a musician or an entertainer, you have some kind of royalties, or you have highly appreciated real estate and properties, right? Or your business is about to sell. Well, who are you going to call? Make sure you make a call before now or before those things happen, because you can have extreme generosity just by calling the right people. And we can do that here at Ron Blue Trust. We do this all day long. And there's some unique ways we can help you give and partner with all your different assets and businesses that allow you extreme generosity, a lot less to the government, and ways to actually continue to impact and steward it. So that's all I'm going to say there, but make sure you make those right calls if you're feeling a call towards how do I engage more in the monetary generosity. Lastly, I'll leave you with some questions here before we go to a Q&A. Is your company intentionally stewarding each of its 5 talents? If not, what did you learn today that you want to apply in your company? Who can partner with you to implement this? Remember, you're not alone. Does your company have a written business generosity plan? If not, who can help you develop or customize that plan? And Jeff Warnick in our business consulting division does a wonderful job of helping businesses think through these plans on the consulting level. So there's people out there. You might know one through FCCI. How does the company measure and track success in accomplishing its calling? How do you know if people and the business is moving towards that center? So there's some practical applications. I know we'll give you this presentation and resources so you can fill this out yourself, but just don't be the Dead Sea. Don't just take this and go, cool, that was a great presentation, and just hoard it and have it go nowhere. Let's go be the Red Sea and let that flow out of you and see if you continue to have rich relationships there. So I'll end it with a picture here of a man that was, I think, probably a faithful steward. He was a missionary and a martyr. His name was Jim Elliot. But he said this wonderful quote that is, he is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. You can't take that business with you, but you can send it on ahead. If that's eternal or if that's to the next generation. So Dead Sea or Red Sea. All right. Thank you for your time.
Colby, thank you so much for that. And I just jumped right past your contact information, but we'll have that in the presentation. We send that out so folks will be able to see that and have that information. But just so thankful for you taking the time because this was just incredibly practical, and I really appreciate that. Just the steps that you've provided here, and I know that our listeners are going to look forward to going through the deck and just really sifting through that and gathering more information and ways to take action and those next steps. So thank you for that. When we were talking earlier, we were talking just what maybe are the first or the most basic steps toward generosity implementation. If someone's saying, yeah, where do I kind of start? I mean, you provided us with a wonderful wealth of information there, but where's maybe a good starting point? How would you describe that, maybe that practical generosity implementation step?
Yeah, that's a good question. I remember early on in my marriage, my wife and I had an opportunity to be rich or to do our first big giving together. And it happened because we were challenged to give, but we happened to be aligned at the same point with this Center for Marriage that was starting, and they had impacted us.
Hmm.
So it was really easy for us to go, oh, this is where we're going to give. We maybe weren't very connected with a church at the time, but we went, they've impacted us. We want to impact them. So as you go towards there's always that like pull of, you got to be generous. And you might read through scripture and go, yeah, I should be, but where? And,
Hmm.
and, and even if you have a lot of money to give, it's not always wise to just aimlessly throw it. So I would say start with where you're engaged, right? If
Hmm.
you're already
Yeah.
working in the shelter, or if you already have a heart towards adoptions or marriage or whatever it is, just start with where your heart's at, because that's the easiest place to give. It's not as much fun if you're just giving aimlessly or you keep going to banquets and you think you have to give, right? Figure out where you want to give more than just the resource. Where do you want to give your time and your talent and your influence? Because then you're fully a part of that ministry.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. And along those lines, I mean, you mentioned the marriage seminars, and I know you've been really involved in that. But maybe just share a little bit more about that and what that is and how you have been involved in and the opportunity that folks would have to participate and be involved in that.
Yeah. Always love the chance to give them a shout out. My wife and I are passionate about marriage. We've been married 10 years, but it started when we were at Biola and took a class called it's like Christian Perspectives on Marriage, and they talked about starting the center, the Biola Center for Marriage and Relationships, and they do incredible work around relationships and marriage and God's design for it. But this concept of how come Christians we're not any different when it comes to like the marriage success, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also of those that stick together, how many are actually thriving? Like, because if we really apply this mentality, we should have like so much fun. Like, we should be like people are like, what are they doing? This is great. That's adorning the gospel, right?
Amen.
So what we've been passionate about is we host a marriage event here in Nashville with the Center for Marriage and Relationships on thinking through emotional, spiritual, and financial intimacy. Because we often focus on emotional intimacy, but we forget that there's a lot of spiritual intimacy.
Yeah.
Like actually going like, hey, what have you been reading lately in your Bible? What has God been touching on and pressing on you? And then the financial intimacy, right? Now, marriages don't end because of the financial disagreements, but they definitely are the main reason, right? There's a deeper issue. So we love hosting those. If you ever wanted to host your own anywhere, that Chris and Lisa, if you build it, they will come. But they have a great podcast too. But I just think there's a lot of opportunities for us to dig deeper. Because if we did, I don't want to preach here, but I think if we did marriage really well, all of society would change, right? Because we'd actually have a house that understood like
Amen.
a covenant of love, right? And if we had marriages that survived, maybe the next generation would see it differently as like a good and not a bad, or all the harm that's been in it. And then where do you think the rest of society go? Because most of our identity comes in those years of our family. So a lot of that lost identity and searching elsewhere is because we didn't find it in the home.
Right. Yeah. That's powerful. And by the way, we brought you here to preach, so thank you for preaching. That's great. But let me just ask this pretty basic question, but I'm sure you get this one a lot. But honestly, who should have a financial advisor? Like, probably a lot of us go, I don't know that I would need one. So where's that threshold, or how would you define that?
That's a great question. everyone needs a financial advisor, but it depends on the level, right? You might not need a Ron Blue private wealth guy because you're just in your first job, but you need someone that's helping because we're too close to our own situation to make objective decisions, right? So that we need someone that's kind of sitting outside and holding us accountable, pointing us in the right direction. But what I would really say is if there's complexity at all, if you have a business, you have complexity. If you're not having the time to sit in those finances, or maybe you don't even need to be. Like when I work with entertainers, I'm like, don't even worry about the finances. They don't care most of the time anyways. But because you do what God's designed you for, and we'll make sure the other things are handled well. So I I would just share, yeah, everyone in some capacity needs one, but it doesn't matter if you just need one because you need one that's actually going to hold you follow a biblical perspective. Someone that's going to help you make biblically sound and centered decisions. Otherwise, it's just someone helping you build bigger barns, and they won't be bad at that, but they might not think with eternity in mind. They might just think with 20 years in mind. Um, yeah, there's my,
That's wonderful, and I really appreciated your reference to Papa Ed and his life and legacy. It's just absolutely wonderful to look back and to see that and to know that. And you mentioned, his sharing of the gospel, and I just wanted to mention that we are in the process of planning a webinar for Q1 that will be very focused on that process of sharing the gospel. How do we do that in a way that makes sense in our business context? So just as listeners, as you were hearing that, and though I know it's always one where it's like, I don't know exactly how to launch into those conversations or what really works well. So look forward to that and more information about that in the future. So, well, Colby, thank you again for taking the time today and being here and just a wonderful presentation and great content that we're going to be able to all chew on for a long time to come. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
hey, it's my pleasure. Yeah, real good to be here. And I think I see one question in here that just popped up.
Oh, I did see that
Um,
pop up. Yes. Fire
can
away.
you
I'll,
can you
I'll
suggest a good resource to engage young people with biblical concepts of financial stewardship? Yeah, there's a lot of great resources out there. If they're readers, I mean, the Treasure Principle is a great
hmm.
place to start with Randy Alcorn. It's a real easy read. I call it like a bathroom read, right? Like, yeah, you know what I'm saying. Um, those are great ones. The Ron Blue Institute has a lot of great resources and videos, and they actually have tried to create content not just for college students but high schools. Because what if we actually grew up knowing like these financial concepts in the Bible view of it, rather than like 40 years later going like, oh, well, now I should do that.
Whoops.
Like if we did it, if we changed it in the very beginning, it's not as hard to do later. It's just like generosity, right? If you start off giving when you got nothing, when you have a lot, it's going to be really easy. Um, Other than that, God and Money is a great book. That's a fun read, not a hard read. I wouldn't jump straight to Money, Possessions, and Eternity. That's a textbook. Maybe if you're in seminary, do that one. Um,
That's great. Great question too, and absolutely, the earlier we can kind of get into these conversations and start that process, the better, for sure. I mean, and what a great stewardship of family, right? I mean, that's one of those amazing ways that we can just pour into the next generation and make sure that they are well equipped. So, yeah, that's great. Excellent. Well, thanks, Colby. We'll look forward to seeing you again in the group there in Nashville before too long, and excited about all that God's going to be doing in and through you. So, blessings on you. Appreciate it.
Thank you again. Good to be
Yeah.
here.
And for those of you that are looking forward to our next webinar, it's going to be November 14, and we're looking forward to enjoying a conversation with Chad Slotta, and as he talks about how to address conflict successfully. And you'll note that we put this right before the holidays. Think about that. All right, so as you get ready for all those wonderful family gatherings, and come armed and ready to do this in a biblical manner. And Chad just does a wonderful job of laying out a biblical foundation and a structure, a framework for how do we address conflict successfully. So you don't want to miss that. In fact, bring your entire leadership team, because it could really transform how you function together and in your business context. So look forward to that, and the information and link for that to register will be in the email that you'll be receiving soon. So thanks for joining us today. Please reach out to us if we can be of any service to you at all here at FCCI, as in your desire to continue to lead a company for Christ. God bless.